Have you ever heard of a killer who plotted to murder his own family, only to later become a symbol of redemption on death row? This is the shocking story of Thomas Bartlett Whitaker, a man who orchestrated the execution of his own parents and younger brother in an elaborate plan to cash in on his family's wealth. But what makes this case so unusual isn't just the crime, it's what happened after. Instead of begging for his own life, Whitaker used his time on death row to become an advocate for fellow inmates, earning the nickname the Death Row Poet. His case would lead to one of the most controversial last-minute clemency decisions in Texas history, leaving many to question, did Thomas Whitaker truly change, or was his transformation just another manipulation? Stick around as we uncover the shocking details of betrayal, deception, and a death sentence that almost happened. On December 10th, 2003, in the quiet town of Sugar Land, Texas, the Whitaker family sat down for what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. Thomas, the eldest son, had just told his parents that he had graduated from college, and they wanted to celebrate his achievement. What they didn't know was that their son had been lying for years. He had never graduated, and he had spent months plotting their murder. The deception had started long before that night. Thomas had enrolled at Sam Houston State University, or so his parents thought. In reality, he had dropped out and spent years aimlessly drifting, unable to live up to the expectations placed upon him. Instead of admitting his failure, he crafted a web of lies, fabricating stories about his classes, grades, and future plans. His parents believed he was close to earning his degree, and the graduation dinner was their way of celebrating his supposed success. As the family returned home from dinner that night, an armed intruder was waiting inside their house. When they stepped through the door, gunfire erupted. Patricia Whitaker, Thomas's mother, was shot dead immediately. His 19-year-old brother Kevin was also fatally shot, collapsing in the entryway. Thomas's father, Kent Whitaker, was critically wounded, but survived. In the chaos, Thomas was the only one unharmed. He claimed to be a victim, insisting he had no idea why his family had been targeted. But investigators soon uncovered a disturbing truth. The entire attack had been planned by Thomas himself. He had hired a hitman, Chris Brassier, to ambush his family. Also, he could inherit his parents' wealth. The supposed graduation dinner was just a cover to get his family together one last time. Investigators quickly found holes in Thomas's story. His injuries were minor, almost superficial, while the rest of his family had been gunned down execution style. The randomness of the attack didn't make sense, and when detectives dug deeper, they found evidence that Thomas had been planning his family's murder for years. Witnesses came forward, revealing that Thomas had attempted a similar murder plot 2 years prior, but it had failed. This was not a sudden act of rage. It was a calculated, cold-blooded plan. Realizing the walls were closing in, Thomas fled to Mexico, hoping to disappear forever. For over a year, he lived under an assumed identity, working odd jobs and blending into the local culture. But U.S. authorities never stopped looking. In 2005, he was finally arrested and extradited back to Texas, where he faced capital murder charges. If this case is as unbelievable as it sounds, take a second to like this video. It really helps the channel out. His trial was sensational, drawing massive media attention. Prosecutors painted him as a narcissistic manipulator, someone so obsessed with wealth and status that he was willing to kill his own family to get it. They emphasized his history of deceit, how he had tricked his parents into believing he was a successful student while secretly plotting their deaths. The jury was presented with damning evidence, including financial records, showing how Thomas stood to gain from his family's death. His defense, however, argued that he had grown up under immense pressure, that his actions were fueled by a toxic mix of desperation and mental instability. The jury wasn't convinced. He was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death in 2007. For most death row inmates, the story ends there. But Thomas Whitaker was different. He refused to be just another statistic, choosing instead to reinvent himself behind bars. He began writing extensively, publishing essays, reflections on morality, and critiques of the justice system. His poetic writing and intelligence gained him a small but passionate following, with activists and even some legal scholars arguing that he had genuinely changed. Then came the moment no one expected. His father, Kent Whitaker, the very man he had tried to kill, became his biggest advocate. Despite losing his wife and younger son, Kent pleaded for his son's life to be spared, arguing that executing Thomas wouldn't bring back the family he had lost. He petitioned the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, asking them to grant clemency, something rarely granted in the state's history. It became one of the most emotionally charged debates in recent death penalty cases. On one side, you had a father forgiving his son, pleading with the state to show mercy. On the other, you had the prosecution and victims' advocates who argued that Thomas was a master manipulator who didn't deserve to escape justice. With just minutes left before his scheduled execution, Texas Governor Greg Abbott commuted a sentence to life in prison without parole. It was a stunning and controversial decision, making Whitaker one of the few men in Texas history to be spared after receiving a death sentence. Today, Thomas Whitaker remains behind bars, still writing, still reflecting on the crime that shocked Texas. Some believe he is a changed man, a living example of redemption, while others argue that he is simply manipulating the world, just as he did when he plotted his family's murder. Was Thomas Whitaker truly rehabilitated, or did he just master the art of deception? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you found this deep dive compelling, subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories.